वीडियो बनानी में मेहनत ही हमारी चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें Jax's revenge domain. I was flying to Munich to close a $2.2 billion merger when my phone buzzed. Access denied. The board had voted to fire me mid-air, assuming I'd be helpless until I landed. They were wrong. I bought the in-flight Wi-Fi, called their biggest rival, and turned their celebration into a funeral. My name is Timothy Brennan. I'm 54 years old, and I just learned that experience beats arrogance every damn time. The flight attendant placed a glass of sparkling water on my tray table, her smile practiced and polite. Well, be pushing back in 5 minutes, Mr. Brennan. Can I get you anything else before takeoff? No, thank you, I said, adjusting my tie. It was a conservative navy blue, the kind you wear when you're about to sign the most important contract of your life. Just the Wi-Fi code, please. I have some last-minute documents to review. She handed me a small card, and I unlocked my phone, tapping the email icon. I expected to see the final draft of the Yamamoto Agreement, a $2.2 billion acquisition I had spent 18 months cultivating. It was the deal that would secure my kids' college funds and keep my ex-wife from dragging me back to court over that alimony modification she'd been threatening. Sarah had already texted me twice this week about our daughter Emma's SAT prep costs and our son Jake's summer engineering camp fees. The divorce settlement was bleeding me dry, but this deal would change everything. One signature, and I'd have enough commission to breathe easy for the first time in 2 years. Instead, my screen blinked. A grey box appeared in the centre of the display. Exchange password required. That was odd. I typed in my password, a complex string I changed every 90 days per protocol. Incorrect password. My stomach dropped. I tried again, slower this time, making sure every character was precise. Account suspended. Please contact IT administrator. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I wasn't just any employee. I was the senior VP of strategic partnerships, the guy who brought in 40% of the company's revenue. My account didn't get suspended for glitches. I switched to our internal messaging system. You have been removed from this workspace. The plane lurched as we pushed back from the gate. The familiar anxiety I'd been fighting since the divorce started clawing at my chest. I opened my personal email, hands trembling slightly, and found what I was looking for. Time-stamped 4 minutes ago. Subject: Notice of termination of employment. Timothy Brennan. The sender wasn't HR. It was from the office of CEO Oliver Caney. Oliver had taken over 8 months ago, a 32-year-old visionary brought in by the board to modernize our operations. In Oliver's world, modernization meant replacing experienced negotiators with AI chatbots and firing anyone over 45 who made more than 6 figures. We'd clashed in every board meeting since his arrival. He called me legacy overhead. I called him a liability. I tapped the email open with a shaking finger. It was brief and cold as a scalpel. Dear Timothy, effective immediately. Your services are no longer required. The board has voted to terminate your contract for cause, citing philosophical misalignment with the company's future direction. A severance package is contingent upon your signing of the attached NDA. Do not contact any clients. Your company devices will be remotely wiped within 1 hour. The plane's engines roared to life, a deep, vibrating thrum that shook the floor beneath my feet. We were taxiing toward takeoff and I was trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 tals on FE, completely cut off from my servers, my files, and my contact list. Heading toward a meeting I was no longer authorized to attend. Oliver had timed this perfectly. He knew I was on flight 442 to Munich. He waited until the doors closed until I was trapped in the sky for the next 9 hours where I couldn't fight back, couldn't call a lawyer, and couldn't warn the client. The son of a thought he had checkmated me. I looked out the window as the runway blurred into streaks of grey concrete. The wheels left the ground and New York fell away below us. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my personal laptop. It was an older Dell, heavy and scratched from years of travel, but it had one feature Oliver had forgotten about. A local hard drive with my entire professional life backed up. You think you can silence me with a push notification, Oliver? I muttered under my breath, flipping the screen open. You just made the biggest mistake of your short career. The seatbelt sign chimed off at $10,000 FT. Around me, other first-class passengers were settling in for the long flight to Europe. Business travelers pulling out tablets, a couple sharing champagne, an elderly man already asleep behind his eye mask. To them, this was just another Tuesday. To me, it was war. I connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi immediately. The connection was slow and expensive. $40 for the full flight, but it was my only lifeline to the outside world. First thing I did was check other flights to Munich. If Oliver fired me, he didn't just want me gone from the company. He wanted the credit for the Yamamoto deal. The signing ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the Betrayal Hotel. I was supposed to be the one sitting across from Mr. Yamamoto, sharing tea and handing him that gold-plated pen for the photo op. If I wasn't there, someone else had to be. I pulled up flight departures from JFK. There was a Lufthansa flight that had left 2 hours before mine. Another was scheduled to depart 3 hours after takeoff. Oliver wouldn't risk the later flight. They'd be cutting it too close for the prep dinner tonight. It had to be the earlier flight. I logged into the airline's frequent flyer database, using skills I'd picked up in my early days working logistics before I climbed the corporate ladder. It was a grey area move, something most people didn't know how to do, but I could access passenger manifests if I knew where to look in the system. There it was. Flight LH441, seat 3AW Fletcher, Wesley Fletcher. I let out a short, bitter laugh that made the woman in 2C glance over at me with concern. Wesley, of course. Wesley was Oliver's 28-year-old golden boy, head of client success, a made-up title that basically meant he sent automated birthday emails and called it relationship management. He was the kind of guy who thought you could close a billion-dollar deal with a PowerPoint presentation and a firm handshake. "You sent the intern," I whispered to myself, shaking my head in disbelief. "You fired the architect and sent the intern to build the foundation." This was either the boldest move Oliver had ever made or the stupidest, probably both. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Emergency Archive. Most people in corporate America live and die by the cloud these days. They trust that their Google Drive or SharePoint will always be there when they need it. But I learned the hard way back in the 90s that digital access is a privilege that can be revoked with a mouse click. Every Friday for the past 5 years, I had manually backed up my entire contact database, every contract draft, every personal note about clients, and every relationship detail to this encrypted local drive. It was old-school paranoia that had just become my salvation. I entered my decryption key, and the folder unlocked like a digital treasure chest. There it was. The Yamamoto Industries profile. 47 pages of everything you could ever want to know about our potential acquisition target. I didn't just know Mr. Yamamoto's business financials and market position. I knew his personal story. I knew his grandson was studying engineering at MIT. I knew he preferred green tea over coffee and took exactly 2 sugar cubes. I knew he was hesitant about this merger because he feared our company was losing its soul, a fear that Oliver had just confirmed in spectacular fashion by firing me mid-flight. I knew that Mr. Yamamoto's father had started the company in 1952 with a handshake deal and a promise to never abandon his workers. I knew that every major decision in the company's 70-year history had been made with employee welfare as the top priority. And I knew that if Wesley Fletcher walked into that meeting tomorrow morning with his generic smile and cookie-cutter presentation, Mr. Yamamoto would see right through him in about 30 seconds. It was 3:15 p.m. in New York, which made it 9:15 p.m. in Munich. Mr. Yamamoto would be finishing his evening tea in his suite at the Berischer Hof, probably reviewing documents one final time before tomorrow's signing. He was methodical like that, never rushed, never careless. If I called him now, I would be violating the termination agreement I hadn't even signed yet. I could lose my severance package, assuming there was one. I could face lawsuits for breach of contract and corporate espionage. Oliver would probably try to have me arrested the moment I landed in Germany. But if I didn't call him, Wesley would walk into that conference room tomorrow morning, present whatever watered-down version of our agreement Oliver had cobbled together, and Mr. Yamamoto might actually sign it. Not because it was a good deal, but because he trusted the relationship we had built over 18 months of careful negotiation. That trust would be broken the moment the ink dried and Oliver started implementing his efficiency improvements. I stared at the flight map on the screen in front of me. We were a tiny white airplane icon floating over the dark Atlantic, somewhere between hope and desperation. The estimated time to destination showed 6 hours and 23 minutes remaining. I wasn't going to just kill this deal. That wouldn't be enough. Oliver wanted to play games with my livelihood. He wanted to strand me at 35,000 FT and steal 18 months of my work. I was going to do more than crash his celebration. I was going to hijack the entire operation. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Apex Industries. Their CEO, Jonathan Pierce, had been trying to poach me for the better part of a decade. We'd competed against each other on dozens of deals over the years. Sometimes he won, sometimes I did, but we'd always maintained a professional respect that bordered on friendship. Jonathan understood the old rules of business. Relationships mattered. Your word meant something. A handshake still counted for more than a contract signature in certain circles. More importantly, Jonathan had the resources to move fast when he smelled blood in the water. I found his direct office line in my contacts and cross-cheated against the company directory online. Still current, I slipped on my noise-cancelling headphones and adjusted the microphone. The cabin noise faded to a dull hum. This was the point of no return. Once I made this call, I wasn't just a terminated employee looking for sympathy. I was declaring war on my former company. I was about to become a corporate saboteur with nothing left to lose except my kids' college funds and whatever remained of my professional reputation. But then, I thought about that last board meeting. I remembered Oliver tapping his M. Blanc pen on the conference table while reviewing our quarterly numbers, looking at me like I was some relic from the Stone Age. "We're spending too much on relationship management," he had said, not even bothering to look up from his tablet. "Clients don't care about your golf games and dinner parties, Timothy. They care about efficiency and cost reduction. This whole personal touch approach is obsolete. I pulled up Wesley Fletcher's LinkedIn profile on my laptop. I had done my research on all of Oliver's key people months ago just to know what I was dealing with. Wesley had an MBA from a decent school, but his work experience was thin as paper. 2 years at a consulting firm that specialized in digital transformation. 1 year at a fintech startup that had imploded spectacularly due to regulatory issues. Then Oliver had hired him as head of client success, based on what appeared to be a 30-minute interview and a slick presentation about leveraging synergistic customer journey optimization. In other words, Wesley was exactly the kind of empty suit that looked great in a boardroom, but had never actually closed a real deal with real consequences. The irony was perfect. Oliver had fired me for being old-fashioned, then sent the most inexperienced person on his team to handle the most important deal in the company's recent history. I looked at my reflection in the laptop screen for a moment. Grey hair at the temples, lines around the eyes from too many years of late-night contract negotiations and early-morning client calls. 54 years old in an industry that worshipped youth and disruption. But I had something Wesley Fletcher would never have: the knowledge of how to read people, how to build trust, and how to know when someone was about to screw you over. I dialed Jonathan's number. The international connection took a few seconds to establish, routing through satellites somewhere over the Atlantic. The line rang twice before a familiar gruff voice answered. "Pierce here! Jonathan, it's Timothy Brennan!" There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone's brain needs a moment to process unexpected information. "Tim, aren't you supposed to be signing the Yamamoto deal tomorrow? I was just preparing my condolences speech for when you steal another client from under my nose." "I'm on a plane," I said, keeping my voice low so the flight attendants wouldn't overhear, "but I'm not signing anything. Oliver Kane just fired me via email while I was over the Atlantic." A long, low whistle came through the headphones. "That's a bold move. Stupid as hell, but bold." "So, you're calling me for a job reference?" "No, I'm calling to sell you the deal of the decade. I have Yamamoto Industries in my pocket, and if you move fast, I can deliver them to you with a better contract than Oliver ever dreamed of." I could practically hear Jonathan sitting up straighter in his chair. When you've been in this business as long as we have, you develop an instinct for opportunity. You realize Oliver will sue you into the Stone Age for industrial espionage if you try something like that. He can try, but first, I need you to hire Charles Hoffman as outside counsel. Charlie's got a personal vendetta against Oliver, got fired last year via a 30-second Zoom call on his birthday. The securities lawyer, he charges $800 an hour. Find, snorts him. Tell him Timothy Brennan is calling in a favor. I've got 6 hours before I land in Munich. Do you want this deal, or do you want to read about how Oliver Kane beat you again in tomorrow's financial press? There was silence on the line for about 10 seconds. Then Jonathan's voice came back sharp and focused. I'm listening. Talk to me. Time remaining to destination. 5 hours, 47 minutes. While Jonathan put together his legal team, I accessed something Oliver had forgotten about in his rush to destroy my digital life: the virtual data room for the Yamamoto merger. When you're working on an acquisition of this magnitude, you don't just email documents back and forth. Everything goes through a secure third-party server hosted by a neutral law firm. Oliver had shut down my corporate email, my internal messaging, and my VPN access. But in his arrogance, or maybe just his inexperience with deals this complex, he had forgotten that VDR access credentials were managed by the external auditors, not our internal IT department. My login was still active. The connection was frustratingly slow, probably because I was bouncing signals off satellites while flying at 40,000 ft. But eventually, the system let me in. I navigated straight to the final agreements folder. There it was, uploaded just 2 hours ago. Yamamoto merger final execution V16 PDF with Wesley Fletcher's user ID attached to the upload timestamp. I downloaded the file, which took nearly 4 minutes of watching a progress bar crawl across my screen. While I waited, I opened my local copy of version 15, the last draft I had personally reviewed with Mr. Yamamoto during our meeting in his Tokyo office 3 weeks ago. When Wesley's version finally finished downloading, I ran a document comparison program. It's a simple tool that highlights differences between two files in red text, usually used by lawyers to